Go further with the American Express Business Gold Card. Earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels when you book through AmexTravel.com. Whether your destination is a business conference or a client meeting, your purchases will help you earn more points for future trips. Experience more on your travels with Amex Business Gold. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold Card. Built for business by American Express.
Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check the Jumbotron first, before attempting to eat a stack of Supreme nachos in one bite. Now you're just a meme that everyone shares on game day. Checking first is smart, so check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary, subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. And on Friday, the 7th of March, it's time for our Friday 5, where we take a look at some of the biggest Nottingham Forest news stories of the week. I'm your host, George Edwards, and in a moment, I'm going to be joined by Baz. But first, it's over to Jamie on the 1865 news desk for this week's top stories.
Hi, this is Jamie Martin with this week's top 5 Forest stories from the 1865 news desk. Now, Forest have made it to the quarter-finals of the FA Cup. After a wobbly few weeks, Forest eventually beat Ipswich in an FA Cup thriller, going the whole 120 minutes and eventually penalties. Despite the Tractor Boys' initial lead, Forest came back thanks to Ryan Yates. However, they couldn't manage a second goal. Penalties it is, and Forest continued their good work, beating them 5-4. A huge result which will now see Forest facing Brighton at the Amex in the quarter-finals on the 29th of March. Second piece of news this week, Forest youngster is shining on loan. Since signing on loan from Forest, Jamie McDonnell has caught the eyes of Colchester fans with incredible recent performances and quickly becoming a fan favourite. The 21-year-old defensive midfielder has impressed the fans as well as youth boss Danny Cowley, whose side sit 10th in the League Two. Positive news for Forest Youth Development System and indeed loan management as a whole. The third piece of news, this week, Reds are monitoring Inter Milan midfielder. New reports emerged recently suggesting Forest are on the lookout for a new midfielder. With eyes on a potential European spot, Evangelos Marinakis' ambition extends to transfers, with Forest reportedly looking at Inter Milan's David Fratesi for a potential summer move. The Italian midfielder is a regular in Simone Inzaghi's Inter side, and with European football a potential for Forest, he could be on the move to the East Midlands. The fourth piece of news this week, reports are linking Forest with an Aina replacement. Reports from abroad this week have linked Nottingham Forest with Fenerbahce defender Bright Asai Samuel as a replacement for Ola Aina. Now, as uncertainty looms over Ola Aina's contract situation with various reports, Nottingham Forest is said to be tabling an offer to sign the defender and have him as Aina's replacement. It is uncertain as to whether a pre-contract agreement has been reached or not, but more news is expected soon on both the transfer and indeed potential contract updates for Ola Aina. Now, the last piece of news this week, Joe Gardner has got his first goal for the Imps. More news on the loan front. Nottingham Forest youngster Joe Gardner got his first goal while at local side Lincoln City. After a tough start earning a red card in his first game, young Gardner has turned his fortunes around with a superb goal in the Imps' 4-1 win over Crawley. A promising youngster with a superb work rate. No doubt he'll succeed this season. Now, it's great to be back. That was all from me, though, at the 1865 news desk. Feel free to catch up with me on Nottingham Forest related news on social media platform X or via my YouTube, Jamie Martin. Looking forward to speaking to you very soon. Until then, enjoy the week. That was the 1865 news desk.
Thanks, Jamie, and welcome back. And let's get straight into the stories that he discussed. So firstly, it was the biggest story of the week that Forest are through to the FA Cup quarter-final for, I think it's the second time this century after the Liverpool one a few years ago. Baz, it was a rather forgettable game until penalties. I think you could say that much about Forest's last round win against Exeter as well. Let's talk about them full-time scenes. I think the guys have alluded to it in the pod already. But it was magical at the end for Nuno for that rare bit of emotion as well. How good was it to see him express that? Because you don't see him do that very often.
No, my favourite bit about it is, I noticed this on against Exeter as well, is for the penalties themselves, he basically hid in the dugout and couldn't watch it at all. And then, for him to come out like that and then carry Aina on his back, apparently Aina said he was knackered, so he couldn't run. So, I mean, I think that says more than any team selection or anything like that. That probably says what it means, what the FA Cup means to him.
Were you at the game, Baz?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, you're watching at home. But I've never been so confident of Forest winning that penalty shooter or in any situation. But penalties came about. I don't know if you felt the same. But I was just so confident we'd go through because I think Nuno learnt the lessons from the Newcastle game earlier on this season. And we had our best penalty takers on the pitch at the end. We had Matt Sells, who's in the form of his life. And I never get this with Forest. I'm always nervous, so I think we're going to do the impossible and throw it away. But I was just so confident we'd go through. I don't know, did you feel the same?
I did, actually. I mean, even like when I saw Nico step up against Exeter, there was like a little moment of worry. It's like, I don't think I can remember seeing him taking a penalty before. And then he just hit it perfectly. And then all 5 of ours against Ipswich were absolutely perfect. I mean, to be fair, 4 of Ipswich's were perfect. But all 5 of ours were absolutely perfect. It's obviously something they'd worked very, very hard on. There was no sign of pressure on anyone's face. Like the Ipswich guy, the one who missed, who got saved. As soon as he stepped up, I said to myself, he's going to miss this. Because you can see that sometimes on people's faces. But the Forest players, they all looked perfectly resolute and knew exactly what they were going to do, which is a great thing to see.
Yeah, and especially the Criswell goal when he just hammers it into the net. No goalie's ever going to save that. And somebody else, as we mentioned, Nuno's celebration, somebody else who isn't really one to be so expressive is Matt Sells, but we saw him sprint away and lead the celebrations really as Forest went through. Does that signify, his importance and his role in Forest squad? Because goalkeepers often make a good save, but then they've got to switch on because it's a corner or something. So for him to have this moment, how big do you think that is for his confidence and for his place in the squad?
Definitely. I mean, it's like, the goalkeeper can only really be a hero in a penalty shootout. He can't lose. But, I think his celebration it suggested that, again, that this actually does matter to the players as well, not just Nuno. However, I think Matt Sells is going to get told off because his post-match interview, he was talking about the Brighton game and the possibility of Wembley. And that's like completely against the one game at a time philosophy of everyone else.
Yes, absolutely. So the Brighton game's been announced to be on that Saturday at 5:15. How are you feeling ahead of that one? Obviously, since we hammered Brighton, they've got into some, a bit better form. So what are you thinking ahead of that one? A game with a place we've not won, I don't think, since we've been promoted.
I don't think I don't remember us winning there.
Even in the Championship when we're both there for a while.
Yeah. I do think it's going to be a totally different game to last time. They're not going to let us do what they let us do last time. And I wouldn't be surprised if we had more penalties, to be honest. I know Tom was saying 3 lots in one season. Well, I could see it doing that again, just because it's exactly set up for that kind of game where it's going to be a war of attrition.
And the thing is you look at teams that win the FA Cup, they never seem to have it easy, do they? They always seem to have games like that, and it's never you sort of win and go through every game so easily. So that's what's setting it up like that. And the final question on this, and it's been one that's been rumbling around the fan base all week, and I cannot think of an answer. So I'm going to ask you first before I give mine. Would you rather Forest finished in the Champions League places or win the FA Cup?
I think, obviously, I've been thinking about this a bit as well, and it would be disappointing not to finish in the Champions League places just because, and obviously you'd said that at the start of the season, would you be disappointed to finish just outside the top 4? And you'd be like, of course not. But given the season we've had, it would be disappointing. But the FA Cup is a trophy and winning things matters. So I don't think we're ready for the Champions League next season anyway. I mean, obviously we'll give it a good go, but then I didn't think we were ready to go up to the Premier League, and we gave it a go, just scraped through. So yeah, if we can do both, then that's absolutely perfect. But if I had to choose between the two, I'd say FA Cup.
Yeah, I think I'm very much the same. And I think people say, as you mentioned, we're not ready maybe for Champions League football. But you've also got to look at it. If we don't, it's likely if we win an FA Cup or finish sixth, that we get Europa League football. And that is a very similar thing because the Europa League teams are still teams that Forest are going to probably have to play one of their strongest squads to beat. And they've still got the 3-game gap between games. So it works both ways. But I think maybe just for that day out at Wembley to have another one to bring memories back of the playoffs that, 3 years ago today, we were in the playoff final, and now we're in the FA Cup final. It'd be something quite spectacular. But I think to have these conversations would be pretty magical.
Yeah. Also, I do think, the fact that it's a trophy, it's actually winning something. It's not coming second or third or fourth. It's like, we get to bring some silverware home, which, like, you ask a Newcastle fan, they haven't won anything for, since the 60s. So it's something important, is that.
And what would you have said? That playoff final day we get promoted and we achieve Premier League football. What would you have said if somebody told you we'd be in this position in 3 years' time?
I wouldn't have believed him. I mean, like, obviously the first season back, it was, it's just let's see if we can avoid relegation. Second season back, it ended up being let's see if we can avoid relegation. To be in this position is... I'm old enough to remember the season when we went up and then finished third in the 90s. And looking back on it over the last, 30 years, I've been like, I can't believe we did that. Like not only did Mr. Clough go up and then finish right at the top of the league, but we did it as well in the 90s. So for us to do it a third time is unprecedented, surely.
I think one person that might be, or I was expecting that, is our ever ambitious owner, Marinakis. But we'll move on to the second story. I'm going to combine the second story and the fifth story that Jamie brought us. So Jamie McDonnell and Joe Gardner both impressing out on loan. McDonnell's been a consistent performer all season, as Jamie mentioned, for Colchester, and they've had some good form recently. And Gardner scoring his first goal at Croydon. I don't know if you've seen it, but it was a really good goal on the wing. Takes his man on, sticks it into the bottom corner with his weak foot. Really good goal from him. And especially for Gardner, you think back to his debut, I think we all remember him getting sent off, quite unluckily actually, against Cambridge it was. So for him to have that moment and for them both to be impressing is so good for the football club, Baz.
Definitely. I mean, I don't know that much about Jamie McDonnell. Obviously, I've been hearing about him this season because of his he's up for like player of the month pretty much every month, isn't he? Yeah. Joe Gardner, I've seen him play a couple of times and I've always been impressed, but you never really know with kids. It's obviously about getting that consistency. So going out on loan like this is exactly what you want. And you think back to to Ryan Yates, who's played in every league, and Brennan Johnson, who worked his way up, and you think that's got to be a good thing for both of them. The only thing that worried me was if Yates gets injured or suspended, and for some reason Zach Abbott isn't available, then I always thought of Joe Gardner would be like the third choice to sit on the bench to keep our little record going. So I don't know who it would be now.
They'd probably get rid of Wayne Hennessy and put the sub goalie on there. Maybe is what I'd suggest.
The other thing I have to say as well, and I don't know if this is true because I saw it on TikTok, but they do the little pronunciation guide. So at the start of the season, the players and the staff will record a little video. So I saw it on TikTok. So I was to say it might have been fake, but it was
AI.
Yeah, but it was like Nuno Espirito Santo, Chris Wood, Murillo, and then it was Joe Gardner, and he went Joe Gardner.
Yeah, well, I think everyone at least knows how to say his name, maybe.
Yeah.
Do you see the pathway into the first team then? Because obviously, Forest, as you mentioned, have that sort of obligation, if you like, to play a youth team player. But do you think there genuinely is one? Obviously, Ryan Yates provides an example for them, but can you see that, or is it fading with the Premier League football?
It's definitely faded. From what I've seen of Zach Abbott, I think he could probably do it in the same way as like Joe Worrell. So he might not be like your first choice, and he's going to make mistakes, but he could probably do it. But then the other thing is, like you'd have said when we went up, Ryan Yates wouldn't be able to do it. there's always this little part of me that thinks that if we kept Joe Worrell, maybe he would have come on like Ryan Yates. There's always like a little thing there. So, yeah, I want to see him come through and see if they can make the step up, because ultimately that's the point of having the academy is to see who can make the step up. And that's why we're investing in it. And I know the facilities are going to get better and better and better, but that's what we all want to see is like kids from Nottingham playing in the red shirt.
And another thing it does, if they're maybe not good enough to make it, you see that selling homegrown players for PSR at the minute is such an important thing, and clubs can make pure profit on that. So that's something Forest have got to consider as well. And I think the fact that Nuno likes such a small squad maybe hinders their chances, but having a good academy has always been part of Forest. So it's good to see it continuing. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to look at the other three stories, the other side.
Your data is like gold to hackers. They're selling your passwords, bank details, and private messages. McAfee helps stop them. Secure VPN keeps your online activity private. AI-powered text scam detector spots phishing attempts instantly. And with award-winning antivirus, you get top-tier hacker protection. Plus, you'll get up to $2 million in identity theft coverage, all for just $39.99 for your first year. Visit McAfee.com. Cancel anytime. Terms apply.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Hello and welcome back to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and your Friday 5, looking at the biggest news stories of the week. The next one was that Forest are interested in Inter midfielder Davide Fratesi from Inter, who's been in the Champions League for them this season, playing well for them. Now, what are your thoughts on this potential signing? Obviously, this time of the season, you can't really take anything concrete and it's just rumour mills. But I was thinking it could go signing a midfielder from the Italian League one of two ways. Remo Freuler or Nico Dominguez. Which one do you think this one might be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a great deal about him. He's one of those, I've seen him on like little highlights of highlight videos and stuff like that, where summary of what happened last week. So I don't know a great deal about him. From what I've seen, he looks very, very, he looks the part. He's fast. He's good at defending. He can take the ball forwards. He sort of plays, from what I can see, he sort of plays slightly differently to the other midfielders we've got as well, which is probably good. And the fact that he's fast probably means that he's not going to be a Remo Freuler. I really liked Freuler, and I thought he did quite a good job for us. But I think, the step up to the Premier League was a bit beyond him. And from what I can see, I suspect Fratesi might be able to make it a bit easier.
Hopefully, yeah. I've got to say, I certainly wasn't in the Freuler fan brigade. But do you think Forest need another midfielder then? Obviously, we might be potentially, let's not say it for definite yet, but we might be in Europe next season. So obviously, we do need depth. But you look at the midfield, that's where we have probably our most options. So do you think midfielder is a priority for Forest, or do you think it's a case of if we find the right one?
Yeah, I think it's more, if you find the right one and it's someone who can fit in. Part of the issue we've got, and it's an interesting one. Like, you look at how Chelsea have handled it, is if we want to bring someone in who's going to be an improvement on what we've already got, then that means, or at least at the same level as what we've already got, then it's the competition for places and whether they're going to play enough. So if we are in the Champions League or even in the conference, then that adds those extra games to it. So it makes us more attractive just to get a higher quality of play. It's not even the fact that they'll be playing at that level. It's more games means you're going to get more games.
Yeah. Absolutely. And another transfer story that's running the mill at the minute. Bright say Samuel potentially signing a pre-agreement contract thing with Forest, which means he could sign on a free transfer in the summer, potentially replacing Aina. Obviously, that's not confirmed yet. But this signing reminds me very much of Aina because it's not maybe the most attractive signing. It's not, I've heard the name, but he's played in the Championship, I think, but he's only made 3 Champions League appearances and 20 in the Europa League. So it's not, a headline signing, but it has the potential, doesn't it, to be like Aina, to be something that really transforms Forest.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, obviously I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but it certainly seems like all the talk a couple of years ago of like taking Brighton's model and Brentford's model of being a bit more data driven and focusing the recruitment, that seems to have worked. So the players like Milenkovic being the obvious example, we found a hole in our system and then found a player whose data fitted that and just went in and signed him. And so if this lad can do the same, then whether it's as a replacement for Aina or not, then that would be great.
And yeah, you've got to back, I think, Forest's transfer strategy, because certainly over the past 18 months, it has been very much spot on. Even if, I think we all know, we don't need to discuss it, that signing Aina has to be a priority for the club. But even if he does sign, do you think that right back is a position Forest have to strengthen? Because I'm thinking of Aina having to play 90 minutes twice a week, and I'm really starting to get quite scared.
Yeah, I was thinking Ipswich and the game before that, whichever that was. One of his strengths is he can do the defending, and then because he's dual-footed, he can then take the ball and then take it and use that to start an attack. And recently he's done the defending bit, and then the ball's got trapped under his feet because he can't quite move them fast enough. So he is looking tired. Obviously, we bought Eric da Silva Moreira, but he's still a kid, so he's not necessarily ready for it. He does look pretty talented, maybe not quite as defensive as Aina. But yeah, it's one of those things where fullback's an area where we're probably a little bit short of cover. I noticed in the Ipswich report, they were saying that Moreno, while he did well going forwards, again, not so good defensively. So it's one of those things. We can't just rely on two fullbacks playing twice a week.
Yeah, and I do feel a bit sorry for Moreira, because of the games he has played, he's played with Jota Silva, so he's had no cover defensively and somebody who doesn't know how to help him going forward. But if we look at those two sort of signings together then, and if Forest get European football, which has been a theme of this podcast, it seems, do you think that prioritising signing players with European football is a priority, or do you think they just have to go down that model of stats, data, and rely on that, or is it a mix of both?
It's I think one of the things that comes across from the way Nuno talks is he wants the players to enjoy being together. So it's identify people with the data and then see if they'll fit in. If they've not had Champions League experience before, it doesn't matter, because they'll get it. And as long as they've got the right attitude and the right commitment to the team, then that'll get them through, I think.
And that's shown by, I think Forest had that offer for Elanga that they rejected from Newcastle, and everybody was a bit like, wow, we're not accepting that. But you've seen how important he is for the squad, and he's really kicked on this season. So that's a huge contributing factor. And before we move on to the Man City preview, we've got a late news story that just made the cut. It's been announced as we're talking in the last hour that Murillo's been called up for Brazil once again for their upcoming games against Colombia and Argentina. Now, it's a brilliant experience for him. I think it'll be tough for him to make his debut. They've got Gabriel and Marquinhos, and they've got them two tough games. And I had a look at the table, and they do sit fifth. Now, there's not really much danger of them not qualifying for the World Cup, but there's still games they want to take seriously, and particularly Argentina want to win. But how much of a testament is that to Murillo that he's been called up once again?
It's absolutely brilliant. I mean, I keep on thinking back to the fact that he'd only played 14 professional games before he came to join us. It's to go on that sort of meteoric rise is absolutely fantastic. He's a joy to watch, and what can you say? We all love him.
Yeah, and he's so Brazilian. And you remember that flick that he did against Brighton in the box, and he's a little back heel. It's incredible. I really want him to get one of those 70-yard shots. Yeah, what'll happen is we'll end up selling him on the first game for his new club. He'll hit one in the top corner, and then we'll be like, where was that? Let's move it on then to this weekend. Forest have obviously got Manchester City in the early Premier League kickoff. In terms of team news, Baz, I think it'll obviously go back to the league side. You don't need me to run through that. The one position that seems to change every match is the person who plays next to Anderson in midfield. Now, for me, I'd have Ryan Yates in there just because of his two recent performances off the bench and his sort of willing factor in these big games. Think about Liverpool. He was there as captain. He was leading us into that. And obviously his performance against Ipswich. Who would be your leading candidate in there next to Anderson?
Yeah, I'd probably... Dominguez and Yates on paper are pretty similar, but... Yeah. Their personality, like Ryan Yates' personality, stands out. You just have to look at what the opposition fans are saying about him afterwards, which is always amusing. And yeah, against a team like City, who are recovering their form, you want to do stuff to disrupt them as much as possible. And Yates is perfect for that.
And going into the game then, obviously Forest have sort of made their home at the start of the season. It was their away form that was the standout. But now I think we've only lost to Newcastle and Fulham, and the Newcastle game was November, wasn't it? So we've not lost at home for a considerable amount of time. And we seem to now play our best football at home. City obviously will be a tough game, but we've had Liverpool here that we managed to get a draw off, Arsenal as well. So are you confident that Forest can get something going into this?
Always nervous. but yeah, I think the fans have been great this season, like really, really good. Like last season, I had moments where I was like, it could get a little bit negative, whereas this season is, especially at home, it's been positive all the way. And so I think back to the first season when we were up and we got the Chris Wood got that late equaliser, and the atmosphere at that, and I could just imagine it being the same again on Saturday morning.
I think that maybe alongside the West Ham game when we first came up to the Premier League was the best atmosphere ever that I've ever heard at the City Ground. What about you?
It was absolutely incredible. I don't think I've ever heard anything like it.
And it was amazing to think as well, that was Chris Wood's first goal, wasn't it? And look where he is now. It's incredible. Anyway, we'll stop with the brief history lesson and we'll leave you there. Hopefully Forest can get a point at least at the weekend, or 3 would be ideal. Thanks for listening, and thank you, Baz. You can find the platforms of where to find the podcast and the social media links at the words 1865.football. Stephen and Tom will bring you that Manchester City report, hopefully with some 3 points in the bag. Have a good weekend, and come on, you Reds.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Everybody loves McDonald's fries. So yes, you accused your mom of stealing some of your fries on the way home. But the bag did feel a little light.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.